Hello and welcome back. We are going to start touching on a concept that is really important in programming. And this concept is a loop. So the idea is that you have a particular function or a set of code or something you want to do more than one time, over and over and over again, automatically. And so let's say you have a bunch of names. So you have Caleb, Nathan, and Zephyr. And for each of these names, you want to capitalize it. You want to maybe put @gmail.com or something at the end of it to get an email address. You want to do something to all three of these. This is where a for loop would come in. And it doesn't just have to be three. It could be one item that's in an array. We'll talk about that in a second. It could be 2 items, 3 items, 3,000 items. It doesn't really matter. It's just going to keep looping until basically it's all done. So let's take a look at a for loop. So a for loop is going to look something like this. We've got keyword for. We set a variable. I is equal to 0. So this is our interval, whatever this is going to start at. This is basically our counter. We'll talk more about this in a sec. How long should this go for? Well, let's say I has to be less than 10. And then after each loop iteration, just increment I by 1. So let's do I++. Console.log I. And so what this is saying is for the variable I, it's going to start at 0. For as long as I is less than 10, console log, whatever that number is, I. And then at the end of each iteration, it's kind of like saying this, I is equal to I plus 1. That's what we're doing at the end here. Only this time, we don't have to write that out. So let's go ahead and save this and open this up in our browser and refresh our page. And we're going to see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And you notice that it's all happening on line 18. So when I click into this and move this over, line 18, sure enough, there is the console log, just like that. So at this point, you're probably thinking, hey, that's kind of cool, but honestly, I don't know where I'm going to use that. So let's create a real life example here. Let's create an array. So we've got a variable of names, and this is going to be an array. We've got Caleb, Nathan, Zephyr, and Henry. And let's say we want to loop through all of these. How are we going to do this? So instead, I'm going to comment this out just so that you can reference this later if you want. Let's create a new for loop in here. And let's actually see what VS Code wants to autofill this with. That's actually pretty perfect. It's doing a few things in here that we haven't learned about yet. So I'm going to undo that. But if you're using VS Code, you can just hit for, tab. So your for loop starts with your for keyword. For variable, I is equal to 0. We want to loop how many times? We want to loop the number of items that are in this array. So let's say names.length and I is less than names.length. So what this is saying is, as long as I is less than 4, keep on rolling. And then at the end of each iteration, let's say increment I by 1. We could increment it by 2. We could multiply it by 10 if we wanted to, but most commonly you're going to see it just increment by 1. And then we could create a new variable in here and say, this variable is the current name. And because this is a list, we have to access these names. So Caleb is going to be index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3. And so we can now say I. Names, the first one is going to be 0. So in the first iteration. And then once it's done, it's basically going to say behind the scenes, I is equal to I plus 1. And so it runs a second time. And then that one's going to be Nathan. And then Zephyr. And then Henry. But we're storing all that in a variable called I. Just interval. Stands for interval. I is equal to interval. Now let's go ahead and console log this. Console.log current name. Refresh our page. And we get Caleb, Nathan, and Henry. Cool, so now we're actually doing something with an array, because up until this point, arrays for us just store a list of data, and it's not actually super helpful unless we know exactly what's in it. Now we don't need to know what's exactly in it. So let's go ahead and make this a little more complicated. Let's create a function in here where we're going to turn an input into lowercase and append @gmail.com. So function, let's call this toEmail address, and it's going to take a name. And we can do this all in one line now. So we can do name, that comes from this parameter here, dot to lowercase, plus at gmail.com. And so this is just concatenating at gmail.com, and it's lowercasing all the names. So now we can take that, we can apply it here. And we're saying the current name is going to be whatever the current name is in our array. This is where it gets a little more complicated. We're going to pass that name, whatever that name is in here as the parameter, into toEmail address. And that's going to return whatever the name is, lowercase, and concatenate at gmail.com. So now let's go ahead and give this a save. And look at that. Caleb at Gmail, Nathan at Gmail, Zephyr at Gmail, and Henry at gmail.com. And so now we're actually doing something useful here. Now the nice thing behind this is we're actually not writing that much code. And as your array gets longer and longer and longer, you're not writing any more code, which is really, really nice. In fact, we could, if we wanted to, even reduce this. And instead of name, we're going to use names I. Let's go ahead and get rid of that. Let's not actually delete it. Let's just comment it out. And so now in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines of code, we can execute these 4 console logs, which doesn't seem like much. But what if we did something crazier? Let's go ahead and do a lorem ipsum loop. So let's take lorem 50. And so we just have 50 words of lorem ipsum in here, dot split on every space. And what this is going to do is say, split there, split there, split there, split there, all the way down. And this could be user input as well. We could split it, and let's change this from names to words, just because it's going to seem a little nicer. And we change it from names to words here as well. So start off at variable 0 or interval 0. Keep going for as long as there are words in that array. We know this is an array because we use dot split. After every loop iteration, go ahead and increment the number I by 1. Current name, so let's do this. Current email is what we're going to say. And what we're doing here is we're saying this current email is going to be whatever the word is, to lowercase, concatenate at gmail.com. So this is going to take every single word in here, lowercase each one, and then add gmail.com, which is a pretty pointless example, but this will demonstrate the power of loops. Look at this. There's now 50 of them in there. We didn't write any extra lines of code. We have 1 line of code here. It's just on multiple lines because there's a long string in there. My editor likes to break it down into multiple lines. So 1 line, 2 line, 3 line, 4 line. In the exact same 5 lines of code, we got 50 outputs. Now that's, pretty useful. And you're going to see these all over the place. This is wildly popular in all programming, especially in JavaScript. Let's say you only wanted the first 10. Okay, well, what we could do is we could actually break out of this loop at any point in time, or we could continue over it. Now what we could do is say, if I is equal to 10, so it's the 10th word. I don't know why we would do this in this example, since we want to loop over every word, but we're going to say, hey, as soon as I gets to the 10th number, increments up to the number 10, simply break. Otherwise, keep running normally. And so this is only going to show the first 10. And what we can do here is we can actually console log I plus the current email so we can see all of these. And what this will show us is from 0 to 9. And there it is. We have 0 to 9, technically 10 items because we start at the number 0. So if you count on your hand, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you have all 10 fingers on your hand pointing outwards. So there you are. And we said, hey, on the 10th interval, just break out of this loop. Don't show anymore. Let's go ahead and comment this and see what happens. This will go all the way down to number 50, or the 49th index. Let's go ahead and comment that out, and let's do something a little more interesting. We're going to use some basic math here. We're going to use this thing called modulus, which we haven't really learned about, and it's okay. You don't really need to know too much about this one. We're going to say if I modulus 2 is equal to 0, so what this is saying is whatever I is divided by 2 has a remainder of 0, continue. And this is going to skip over the loop. So whatever is down here, for example, this console log, this will not run. The continue statement basically says, hey, everything below here, if this continue statement is executed, this stuff does not get executed. Move on to the next iteration. So let's go ahead and save that, and let's see what happens here. We get every second one. So for instance, we don't see the number 10 in here. 10 divided by 2 is 5 with a remainder of 0. And so because this is true, it's going to continue. It's not going to console log. And so that's how we create even and odd rows. And like tables, when you have like a gray row, white row, gray row, white row, gray row, white row. This is basically all we're doing. So this is your introduction into for loops. This is actually also an introduction into while loops and for each loops, 2 other loops we're going to get into right away. But what I would like you to do before you move on is create a basic for loop. So go ahead, use the for keyword. Variable I is equal to 0, I is less than, or maybe less than and equal to a particular length. I++, don't forget to add that. And then maybe just console log whatever I currently is. And that's all I would like you to do. Just get a little hands-on experience with it. You don't need to be a professional at it to move on to the next lesson at all. I just want you to get a little familiar with this weird-looking syntax, the way that this code is sort of described using funny characters in a funny order.